Hey, what's happening? I'm back. It's Robert Phoenix, and it's Sunday night, and welcome to another edition of Sunday Night AstroLive. And right on time, right on cue, we have the Astrological cat checking in with us. Anything you want to share with people? No, I can hear myself. That's never any good. Use me. There we go. I got rid of that. Oh, we got the other, what we call Rosie, the astral cat, because Jasper is the astrological cat. You're the astral cat. I think so. Yeah. You want to come up here too? You want to join the party? It looks like I'm in the Winchester mystery spot, doesn't it? It's a little weird. I've been away all weekend. So I just got back a couple hours ago and getting ready to fire up and do a show here. And a good one, hopefully. How was everyone tonight? Are you rolling with the changes? The next chapter? Yep, the next chapter. That's right. You never wore a mask, did you? I never once put a mask on either of you. I saw dogs with masks on. It was pretty ridiculous, I have to say. I actually saw that. A dog with a mask on. Bizarre. I was in Austin today, and I did see people with masks. I don't really see them that much where I live. About 55 miles west of Austin. I don't see people with masks much here. But in Austin, it seems to be kind of grafted onto the new reality. Literally grafted onto the new reality. I was getting gas today, and I was, I don't know, where was I? I think it was First, like South First Street and Stasny or something like that. And I was getting gas. I actually found cheap gas. We're going to get into gas tonight because it's not going to be cheap. And there I am. I'm at the pump, and there's this guy who is walking by. He's got a backpack on. He's got glasses, thick rimmed glasses. He's got a computer bag. And he's got a big black N95 mask, or N91, or whatever they're called, the special N masks. And he's walking to go catch the bus. It's outside. There's nobody around. And he's masked up. I'm like, what planet are these people on now? I mean, we really have reached this kind of temporal fork in our world, haven't we? There's a group of people that are living with one reality, and there's another people living with another reality. And then somewhere in between is the gray zone of what they interpret and want to feed us as so-called reality, like whatever is going on in Ukraine, which I'm going to do my best to get into it tonight. And we're going to look at Putin's chart. That should be interesting, huh? What does this go to? We got that. Okay. I'm going to look at Putin's chart, and the rating for Putin is a double D. Now, for some people, they may get very excited when they hear the word double D, but when it comes to charts, it's not considered to be a very good rating. So Lois Roden, who is the grand dame of rating astrological charts, she came up with a rating system with double A being the absolute best. And there are some charts that are, I guess, A, B. Every now and then you see a C chart. It's kind of like, okay, well, it's a pretty good chance that this could be the birth time. Then you get into D, double D range. It's like, yeah, I'm not going to commit to this. Not going to commit to this, right? So, oh, good. This is ready. I'm going to play you guys a video tonight. I worked on it just before the show. And then you have X, which means forget about it. Like this really is not probably the best representation of a birth time. And then some you'll have rectified. You'll see a couple different versions, and but they may not have a rating. You'll see that they've been rectified. So Putin's chart comes out to be a double D, but we're going to look at it anyway. And I think Putin is an enigma. I'm not even sure we're dealing with a real human, to be frank with you. And I'm going to play you about a 15-minute clip that gets into the history and theory behind what's called robotoids, which are developed specifically in Russia a long time ago. I'm going to play a clip. It's going to be 15 minutes. It's very interesting. And I put a few visuals in there just to kind of mess with you a little bit. And it does have to do with this character known as Putin. And then we're going to go in, we're going to look at his chart. I have Zelensky's chart because he does seem to be, for all intents and purposes, a real person, whatever that is. He's an actor. So we're going to look at his chart. I do have a chart for Ukraine the day they kicked Yukashenkov or Yunishenko, the guy who was elected but didn't want to get in bed with the EU and wanted to turn his allegiance towards Russia, the guy that they kicked out, the guy that they spent $5 billion American dollars to get out, where they had snipers on the roofs of the buildings in Kiev, where they were shooting innocent people and blaming it on Yunishenkov or Yukash. I can never remember how the fuck to pronounce his name. Pardon me. But that guy who's not there, right? So that was on the 23rd of, it was on the 21st. It was on the 21st of February in 2014. And then he formally resigns. There's a massive vote in the Ukrainian parliament to vote him out. They have to at this point because, number one, the public opinion is been so ramped up and amplified that if you voted to keep him in, you were done. Like you were just cooked. At that point, you're like, okay, I vote this way and I get to maybe keep my job, but more importantly, I get to save my life. That's where that was at. So they voted him. See ya. We're going to have a new duly elected government or reelected, whatever. I mean, their elections were hacked, and not in a way that we think that they'd be hacked by, I don't know, the party that wants to do the hacking. It was really that people are spending $5 billion in order to get his ass out. That's who was messing around. Anyway, so he goes, and they have a new Ukraine, and guess when they have it? They have it on 2/22/2014. So this 22 date plays a pretty significant role. And then if you add 8 years to 2014, which is really what it was, 8 years from that day, you get 2/22/2022, because it was just 8 years after this major event where they were like, okay, we're done. We're going to take on this new government. It's going to have some weird kind of new proto-fascist kind of ideology, symbolism. And that's what happened. That's what they created. So we're going to look at that chart tonight. I guess we'll take a stab at the chart of the week to see where we are. And I'm also going to look at these different phases of Pluto and Pluto retrograde. There's a controversy. There's some controversy about the Pluto return. And I'm going to try to put some of that controversy to rest. First of all, we're talking about tropical astrology. And we're going to look at the Pluto cycle, which really begins prior to July 4th, 1776. Pluto is already in Capricorn. Prior to that, it's already at 27 Capricorn prior to that. And when we have the outer planets, they go through direct and retrograde cycles, and they're pretty significant. And so Pluto had actually gone retrograde early on in 1776, and then moved forward, and eventually gets to 27 Capricorn. And then the whole thing with Pluto cycles is that, like, they're not fully done until there's like complete separation. So, for instance, we're not really going to be done with this Pluto cycle until 2024, when Pluto finally moves into Aquarius. On your back, okay, into Aquarius in 2024. Because even if Pluto is at 28 degrees and 29 degrees, it's still a conjunction, and there's still some heat and there's still some intensity, even though the planets are separating a bit, or the planet's separating. So we're gonna look at these various stages of Pluto over the next couple of years between now and 2023, and where it is at 27 degrees, because we're in a process now. And that process started, for all intents and purposes, that process started in 2019 with the Saturn-Pluto conjunction at 25 degrees. It was only 2 degrees off of the US Pluto. That's pretty damn close, right? That is pretty damn close. When we talk about astrology, we talk about conjunctions and orbs. Once you get in within a 4-degree orb of an aspect, it really starts to click. And the closer you get, the more intense the conjunction gets. So we're talking about a 2-degree conjunction, or 2-degree orb from Saturn and Pluto. And we could basically look at that time and go, huh, interesting. Something was going on there. Of course, something was going on. They shut the country down. And it was a precursor of what was to come, because by the time this was all over, theoretically, when I say it, I'm talking about the Janus ritual and the donning of the mask. We would be a different country, and we are. There's no doubt that we're a different country. We're not the same country that we were pre-3/11, 2019. I'm sorry, pre-3/11, 2020. That's my bad. Let me go back. Yeah, 20. So it was the Saturn Jupiter conjunction in 2020. Let me just get this straight. Okay. The Saturn Jupiter conjunction in January of 2020 at 25 degrees. That's when things change. That is the precursor to what's going to happen later on. That, and remember, those are happening at 25 degrees Capricorn. That's just 2 degrees off of the US Pluto. That's a really, really close conjunction. And so we go through it. We go through that shutdown phase. And what happens? Well, something very significant happens. And Trump on 3/13 basically calls for this state of emergency. He activates FEMA. And what he does is he says, by doing this, we are going to let each state handle its own response to this. Oh, what the hell is that? Sticker. Where'd this come from? Did you bring this in? We're going to let each state handle the response to the pandemic. That's what he said. And on paper, it made a lot of sense. If you don't have that many people in, let's say, Wyoming, and you have a lot more people in, let's say, New York, you're going to handle it theoretically differently. Whatever you think about it, whatever you think about what happened, whatever you believe to be real or not real, this is how it was mandated. And it was, okay, well, you go handle it this way, you go handle it that way. And it's not going to be one size fits all here. Well, what happened? Well, we got balkanized during that time. And we're still balkanized. Joe Biden renewed that Emergency Authorization Act, and that was set to run out again on the 13th of March. He quietly renewed it. So we're still in this state of emergency. I'm not sure why, because it sure as hell doesn't look like a state of emergency. Hospitals aren't burdened. Not in this town. Look around. Do you hear about hospitals being overrun by people with all these cases of COVID? And COVID itself is taking a back seat to another story, which we're going to talk about. But so if we go back in time, we can see that this process of the Pluto return was already in play because we're dealing with conjunctions, and the conjunction was really, really close at that point in time. We get balkanized, and we're still balkanized. We were fragmented and atomized by the blue states and the red states in the concerted effort to socially engineer these groups inside of these certain areas was very successful, incredibly successful. And go back in time, that's when the true node was in Gemini. So what was happening? We were getting fragmented. We were getting split apart. We were becoming not just one nation within a nation, but we were becoming many nations within a nation. We were becoming many states within a state. I live in Texas. I live out here in red country, and the weekend I was in dark purple blue country, and it's a very different reality. So this is a picture postcard of what the Pluto return looks like. We've been in it. It's not like all of a sudden, hey, 27 degrees, although certain things did happen, don't get me wrong, and they are happening now, and we're hitting this accelerator at this point in time. But it was already in the making. We were already dealing with a version of the Pluto return even before it officially became the Pluto return. What's happening? Somebody's trying to get a hold of me. It's my kid. I can't take it. I'd like to, but this easy in here. No. Hold on. I think I can do this. Okay. All right. So then we go through the summer of Floyd, and we go through like the absolute worst violence in America on the streets since 1968. When guess what? Chiron was in Aries, and we have Chiron in Aries at that time. We become a different country. Statues topple. Usually when statues topple, that's a sign of an overthrow, kids. That's a sign of a revolution. So this idea of a revolution works a couple different ways. You know, we had a revolution in 1776, and we're having a different kind of revolution in 2020, 2021. That doesn't mean that revolution is the only revolution, because we have cycles within cycles, like our clock over here, revolutions within revolutions, and that's happening too. Especially when you bring all the Aquarius into the mix, which we'll talk about tonight. But that's when the Pluto return really started. The toppling of statues, the balkanization of the country, the red state versus blue state kind of map that we're seeing now, the redistribution of people topographically throughout the country, the greatest migration in history since the Dust Bowl. That all happened. The face of America changed. The country changed. We've got 200,000 new people that just came into this country over the past year, for better or worse, right? So we're living in a very different country. And this is what we talk about when we talk about the Pluto return. And when we look at the United States chart, we're talking about the second house, which has to do with material values. And dominated by Capricorn, we're redefining what those are. We're redefining what those material values are and how they manifest in the outer world and in our life as well. We've been looking at a lot of these homestead channels. They're very popular on YouTube. And that gets into the opposite sign of Capricorn, which is Cancer, and looking at, how we can get through this time and create, for all intents and purposes, seed pods of light, where people are breaking the chains around this dominant paradigm that has been asphyxiating us through debt, through fiat currency, through social engineering, through the advancement of an absolutely plutocratic state on the backs of trauma and psychological operations. People understand this. They're not dumb. And what they're doing is like, hey, we gotta move. Meanwhile, you've got on the other side of that equation, the Death Star BlackRock. Talk about Pluto and fucking Capricorn going in and starting to buy up huge tracts of land. Bill Gates buying up huge tracts of land because they know that they're in competition now with the average person to determine what the social topography is going to be like in the next decade. This one and the next one, but primarily the next one. So we're in a very interesting time. And Pluto, the Pluto return, it already started. Like, we've been in it. And now we're moving into a new phase. And that includes this strange kabuki dance, kabuki theater with Russia, who just so happens the next iteration, the latest iteration of Russia happens to be Capricorn, when they decided that they were going to become another country again after the fall of the wall. It was December 25th, 1998, if I'm not mistaken. That's their chart. So they are a Capricorn country. They don't have Pluto. Pluto has already hit their sun. They've already gone through Pluto hitting their new natal sun based on, like, hey, we're a Russian Federation. Look at us now. They've already gone through that. And they've been going through a decade. Well, when did they really start to hammer Russia? It was around 2014. It was right around 2014 when they flipped Ukraine. And I believe that's when they had the Winter Olympics in Sochi, right? I think it was 2014 or 2016. It was when Saturn was going through. So it's past 2015, because I looked at this. Every time Saturn went through the U.S. 12th house, they'd have a crisis with Russia. Hey, how about that? They would have a Russia crisis. And the last time that had happened was during the late 1950s, when Nikita Khrushchev was the premier of Russia, and he basically said, "We will bury you." That's when the Cold War really starts to heat up. The Cold War doesn't really heat up with Stalin. The Cold War heats up with Khrushchev, and then the person who follows him, which is Leonid Brezhnev. So it's between Brezhnev and Khrushchev that the height of the Cold War is being acted out. And that's when Saturn goes through the US 12th house. I tracked this. You go back to post 2015, so it must have been the 2016 Olympics in Sochi. That's when Saturn was going through the US 12th house again. And what do we have here? We've got the Russia crisis. Here we go. We're recasting Russia as Ivan Drago and the villain of the planet. And I just thought it was fast. I was like, as an astrologer, looking at it from that Saturn transit through the 12th house of the US chart, I'm like, oh, this is interesting. This makes sense. You can see a pattern here. You go back to a 30-year cycle. It would have been 30 years before, what, right around 1958, 57. So that's the beginning stages of World War II, the rise of Stalin, another Saturn transit through the U.S. 12th house. we don't really have a Russia problem per se, but it will become one. So anyway, but watching it just from a distance, I go, why are they doing this to Russia? Why are they running down their Olympics? Like they were running down the lodging, the places to stay. I mean, where else have you heard that with any other Olympics? The last Olympics in China, the Winter Olympics, apparently, did you look at the food? It looked like shit. And I think it was in the Japan Olympics, they were sleeping on these compressed cardboard mattresses, but they didn't run them down, right? But let's make Russia our cannon fodder here. So that was all happening. I was watching them. Going, oh, this is interesting. So what they're doing is they're building this profile of Russia as being this evil entity on the global stage, because they need that. They need to have this polarity, right? They need to have this polarity with this theoretical villain that's out there that's doing all these horrible things. And you remember when they had Pussy Riot and Femin, and Pussy Riot would go, and who knows what Pussy, or maybe Putin hired them. I don't know. They do this shit. They'll create a group, and sometimes the group will be an absolute group asset, right? There'll be a cutout, there'll be a limited hang, and then they put them down and they're gone. I don't know. I don't know if that's the case with Pussy Riot. Maybe they were truly trying to be radical. I mean, they were doing some radical stuff, truly radical stuff. They went inside of a Russian Orthodox church and started cursing and just being incredibly sacrilegious. And then they had a press conference where they were shagging. I swear to God, they had a press conference where they're actually shagging in public. I've seen the pictures. You can go look it up if you want. I mean, this is what they were dealing with in Russia at the time. It was like bizarre. And you had, I think, Femin who were running around topless and trying to protest. And so it's weird, right? Like that's happening. They're starting to badmouth Russia. They're starting to create Russia as this global pariah, the Ivan Drago of the modern era. So you have to wonder, are they like trying to run a color revolution inside of Russia? Is that really what was happening at that time? Because that's all you heard. And it really hasn't abated. Now, I think Pussy Riot got kicked out. They don't have any more. I mean, they clamped down hard. And I've talked about this before. It's not a topic that is an easy one to talk about. But I understand why dictators become dictators, because you have all these people inside of a country who want to basically stir shit up, disturb the shit, flip the regime, tap into bad actors outside of the country. Doesn't matter who the bad actor is. It could be the Russians. It could be the Chinese. It could be the Americans. It could be the Israelis. It doesn't matter. Now, all of a sudden, you have an opposition group, and then you're forced to deal with the opposition group. So what do? Do you extend an olive branch and give them a hug when you have this opposition group? And really their sole goal is to make you look bad. They're going to make you look like you're a human rights violator. This is what they were doing to Trump. This is the exact same strategy that they did with Trump. It's how you do a regime change. You basically promote the person who's running the country to be an incarnation of Adolf Hitler, and then you do a few other things. So if you're running a country, what do you do? How do you deal with these people? You have to put them down. You have to put them down like the rabid dogs out there. I'm sorry. This is, you can't like open your heart and say, please come to the table. Let's talk. Let's break bread together. Number one, your political opposition will see you as being weak. Your political allies will see you as being weak. It's just the way it is. In that world, right? That's why, quote unquote, Jesus Christ is the prince of another world and not this one. Because that's not really how it works here. And maybe sometimes you can be the person that can exemplify some of those ideals and you can change people, but it's usually through sacrifice. It's usually through the surrender and the plight of one's sacrifice where the people who are doing the persecuting then become changed. That's how it works. It's like, holy shit, look what we did. And this person forgave us. Oh my God. That's got to be one powerful and mighty God you got there, because it's much bigger than I can wrap my head around. And then that power turns within them, and they get on their knees and they say, please forgive me. I didn't know what I was doing, but I just saw something I can't even begin to comprehend. I mean, that's theoretically how it's supposed to work. Theoretically, that's how it's supposed to work. Now, sometimes it does work like that. Sometimes it can't work like that. But generally, by and large, in the world of politics, that's not how it works. So if you're somebody like Putin and you have people who are inside of your country, whoever Putin is, by the way, we're going to get into that. Whoever Putin is, what do you do? What do? You put him down. That's the one thing Trump didn't do. Trump didn't put him down. Sorry to say. And I know there's a lot of people out there that'll say, well, he let it all happen just to show everybody how bad it was. And by showing how bad it was going to help him get elected. Didn't work out all that well. Me personally, I would have liked to see a little more of the dictator in Trump. I'm just saying, if they're going to call you a dictator, if that's who they're going to cast you as, you may as well just go ahead and, just lead into it a little bit. At least stop the damn riots in 2020. All right. Let's see who's here. One time I took one of those online personality tests, and they put you wind up in these quadrants. And I think I was a combination of Mahatma Gandhi and Joseph Stalin. And I think that kind of fit in a weird way. Okay, let's see where you're at. Let's see who you are. Let's see what's happening tonight. Who's in the house? Because we got a lot of ground to cover. I got a really, really cool video I want to play. It's a video. It's kind of a video. It's a film recording, slideshow. It's what I did. All right, who do we have here? Where is this? Okay, we got a what's up, everyone. JJ, Rain, DeBlanc in the house. David Hawk, trying to stay above the waves. Well, with a name like that, I think you got a pretty good chance. Looks like Joan is here, the lovely and talented one. My man, Benito, we just had the pleasure of hanging out with last week. Provocateur Astrological from Portsmouth, New Hampshire. Wendy Eater, CC Jones. What's going on, Fran? Claire, all right. The guest house. The guest house is in the house. There she is, the one and only Christine Mose. Dave Sullivan, I see people with masks here in Tucson. That's weird, man. What happens when it gets super hot? Do they still wear those masks in Tucson? Beth Cummings checking in from the Middle West. Masks are so 2020. I agree, April. Urban centers run, don't walk. Can't love the content. Has some questions on the 2024 eclipse. Okay, we may get there. Maybe not tonight. Maybe we'll look at that next week. But that's a good topic. Thomas Jordan, nothing has changed in Massachusetts. I love that, Tom. That's great. Let's see who else we have here. Kelly B. People still wearing masks tend to be blank holes with shitty attitudes. Joan says, I like the meme, take off your mask so you can smell the bullshit. Absolutely. South First and Stasny, that's near me. Well, Jane, I was right by your house where I got the cheapest gas in Austin. It was at a convenience store. It had a weird name. It was like Pack and Go or Pack a Go or something like that. And there was a Korean and sushi restaurant right next to a Mexican restaurant there. You may know that place. There he is, DJ MC in the house. What's going on, Michael? Astrology with her. Hey, there she is. What's going on, Heather? Nice to see you. EK is here. There's my man Ryan. They love the mask around here. Some people are so attached with it. There's Sony. She's here. Susie Gemini. There are places where few wear masks in Austin. Where few. Matt's El Rancho. I drove by there today. Brianna Eves. David Leo King did a whole special on shattered realities and dual worlds. I'm sure it was absolutely tremendous. Chaos engagements. Libra Putin. Putin's a hard guy to grasp. Rick Levine did Putin's Rick Levine did Putin's chart and called him Trump accidentally. You know what that's like? I'll tell you what that's like. I should be nice to Rick. I should be nice to Rick. Rick's a good guy. I'm not going to say it. Okay. Timothy Hartful, he's here. Yeah, you're on time. And hey, even better, I'm on time. Maya Rose checking in. Let's see. Helen Levine. Oh, that's a little bit of a holdover from Friday's show. I can see that. Friday's show was kind of amazing. The only problem with Friday's show is my internet kept going out. Everything else was like intense and good. Let's see. We got who else is here? Jay, the chart rating has to do with birth timing. That's correct. Yes. Graham Love. Howdy, Graham. Can you get Joseph Tittle on your show? He is old school blog talk. I'll check him out. Date of birth 9/22/1970. Okay, I'll check him out. Blog Talk is still around? Wow, that's interesting. We share the same birthday, at least the day, 10 years apart. Should get on pretty well. Have you ever had an encounter with somebody born on the same day in the same year as you? I have. It was very interesting. It'll be in the memoirs. Let's see. Who else do we have? W.C. Ray, busting out for Rosie. Little Tommy Bolin reference there. Love that. Ukraine is a puppet state of the West. Yes. 23 McGraw, greetings back at you. Mark Fuller, first chart interpretation of a possible robot. Interesting. Yes. I know, right? We're going to get into that. It's happening. Like it is happening. You're picking up on the airwaves there. Arlene Vega. Greetings to you, the winner of love. I didn't buy the Iraq excuse for war, and I don't buy anything the MSM or NATO tries either. Man, gov suck. Yes, they do. Absolutely. Wendy Quintana, she's here. Shasta Fogg. Good to see you, Shasta Fogg. Who else do we have? Zelensky is an Aquarian. Jolie Evans. What's going on, Jolie? Yes, do not swallow the narrative. It's easy to swallow too, isn't it? Tessa Dick, what's going on? Tessa D777, how are you? Are you managing to stay warm up there in the rarefied atmosphere of the mountainy ranges? It's nice to see you. I hope all is well. Let's see. Telegram has some places directly from people in Ukraine. That would be good to see. Let's see, who else do we have here? Anybody else? Got a good house here tonight. Good group. Jennifer Clark checking in from Commie, Canada. Yes, indeed. Okay. Putin on the Ritz. I was thinking about that, Kent. I was thinking about that title today. Squirrel in the house. Yes, Jay Inslee, another commie-crat. Michael on Wheels. Hi, back at you, Michael. Seer artist, degrees matter. They do matter. Of course they do. But when you get into those really close degrees, it's on like a switch. Let's see. Who else do we have here? Lady Virgo. Hi, Lady Virgo. Susan Chappelle. Carol. What's happening, Carol? Sonia K. I think we're almost caught up here. We're almost here. Nevada. Rock and roll hoochie coo. Red pill 78 GF. Late to the party. You're just on time. We haven't really started yet. We're waiting for you. Gas 1123. I have a Pussy Riot t-shirt. Laugh out loud. Kevin Stick Evers. Good to see you, Kevin. Edgar Casey said Russia would be the savior of freedom. Maybe that's what's happening. Maybe. I think maybe is a word that we should all become really familiar with and comfortable with. New moon coming up And the chart is incredible. I like that. Okay, Tinfoil Tiara, Natasha. We got Natasha here, Cheryl Luciavo. All right. Jan, another commie free. I think we're good. Sticky Marks and Sarah and Justice Moody. Magical Catacorn, and of course, last but not least, Southwest Florida Real Estate with Lewis Walden. All right, let's get going. Thank you for all being here, present and accounted for. Okay, I'm going to play you a little video that I put together, a little slideshow. Now, the audio that you're going to hear is, I played some excerpts from this audio before, and it has to do with a character, a very interesting character by the name of Dr. Peter Better. Peter Bader. It's like, well, it's a weird name. It's a weird name. Hold on a second. Dr. Peter Bader, B-E-T-E-R. He was an American attorney and financier. He ran for governor of West Virginia in 1968 in the Republican Party primary. I believe, if I'm not mistaken, he is a late degree Gemini, 29. I think it's 29 degrees, born June 21st. So he's right at the edge of Gemini. That'll give you some insight into what we're going to talk about. And one of his, he was a groundbreaker, and he did these very strange. They were like audio newsletters. So you would get a cassette, like if you subscribed to his newsletter, you would get a cassette of his newsletter, and it wasn't a written newsletter, which is kind of intriguing. He's a Gemini, so he's going to talk pretty much. I mean, don't get me wrong. Gemini's right as well. They do right. But he was definitely in the talking mode. So I'm going to play this video, and it's got some, I just threw some visuals in here because they're interesting visuals, and it does have to do with Putin. So let's go along for the ride here. I'm going to put my headphones on. Video is about 15 minutes. It's really audio with a little bit of a slideshow, but I think the information I've always found the information to be interesting, always. So buckle up and let's take a trip into the past and quite possibly a trip into the future. Here we go.
Here, my friends, is where the new Russian intelligence weapon enters the picture. What I am about to reveal, I am revealing primarily for history. I know even before I reveal it that some of my listeners will desert me after they hear it, saying, "It just cannot be." But, my friends, I also know that the events in the days ahead will be impossible to understand without knowing this secret. So I do not ask that you believe it simply because I say it. What I do ask, and I ask it for your own good, is that you keep an open mind. Listen and hear what I must now reveal. Then watch events themselves. My friends, since World War II and before, scientists the world over have been probing for the basic secrets of life itself. And in this field, as in others, progress has been much faster than the public has been led to believe. Today, it's common knowledge that heredity is governed by something called genes. Yet barely a generation ago this relationship was only beginning to be suspected. When it was suggested in 1944 by a theoretical physicist, Erwin Schrödinger, it was a novel idea. Beyond that, no one was too certain what genes were, aside from huge molecules or clusters of molecules. Some thought they were molecular chunks of protein, some thought they were something else. When Schrodinger's ideas about genes were published, World War II was still raging, and basic scientific research was on a back burner. And yet, barely a half a dozen years later, researchers were zeroing in on a building block of life even more basic than genes. The solution was found to this revolutionary puzzle in April 1953 at Cambridge University in England. Scientists James Watson, Francis Crick, and Maurice Wilkins were later to share the Nobel Prize for solving the puzzle. They had discovered the molecular structure of DNA, the famous double helix. In 1968, Watson published a book titled The Double Helix, published by Atheneum, New York, New York. To understand the overwhelming importance of the double helix discovery in 1953, one need go no further than these few words on the jacket of the book. Quote, "DNA is the molecule of heredity, and to know its structure and method of reproduction enables science to know how genetic directions are written and transmitted, how the forms of life are ordered from one generation to the next." Unquote. In other words, to understand DNA is to begin to understand life itself. It has now been over a quarter century since the crucial discovery of the DNA double helix, and since then research in molecular biology has not been standing still, but speeding up. In some cases research has gone in directions which are deliberately sheltered from publicity because of the fear of public reaction. Not so long ago, for example, universities doing research into artificial microbes found their neighbors in an ugly mood when they found out about it. Test tube babies are now a reality, and that began not long ago in England, where the mystery of DNA was first unraveled. Then of course there are clones, that is, creatures which are reproduced by artificial means and which are exact duplicates of an original. Clones of all kinds of animals have been produced successfully in the laboratory, but that is not what bothers people. In the recent past it has been claimed that human clones are also possible, and that some may already be in existence. These last claims about human clones have been ridiculed, denied, and suppressed by all kinds of officials. The reason is that the idea of duplicate human beings impinges upon a super-secret realm of intelligence activities by both Russia and the United States. True clones are not involved, but something that bears a superficial resemblance to cloning is going on. And the last thing the powers that be want is for you and the public to have any hint about what is afoot. In Russia as well as in the West, research has been underway for many years in biological synthesis, that is, artificial life forms. And according to high intelligence, a stunning breakthrough took place in Russia some years ago. The Russians refer to this breakthrough as a providential discovery, something they learned almost by accident. They discovered the key to creating what are known as organic robotoids. An organic robotoid is an artificial robot-like creature. It looks and acts exactly like a human being, and yet it is not human. A robotoid is alive in the biological sense, but it is an artificial life form. Robotoids respond to conventional routine medical tests in the same way as humans do. They eat, they drink, they breathe, they bleed if cut, and they can be killed. Robotoids can also think, but they think only in the sense that a computer thinks. Like any other computer, the brain of a robotoid has to be programmed for each assignment it is given. But unlike many electronic computers, the biological computer brain of a robotoid possesses an enormous memory. As a result, robotoids can be programmed to communicate and think in such complex patterns that they act human. Organic robotoids are remarkable creatures, but they have many drawbacks. They don't grow or reproduce, but must be manufactured one by one in the desired form. They also have a very limited lifespan, measured in months or even weeks depending upon how they are utilized. This is due to the fact that their metabolism, while it resembles that of humans, is very inefficient. A robotoid can be manufactured on very short notice, a matter of hours. But after a few weeks or months it suddenly begins to degenerate physically and mentally. When that takes place, the robotoid has to be removed from service and disposed of. To extend its useful life as much as possible, a robotoid is customarily cooled down to slow its metabolism between assignments. Organic robotoids are extremely expensive, troublesome creatures to produce and utilize, and robotoid capabilities do not exceed those of human beings. All they can really do is simulate human beings. But my friends, for intelligence purposes, that's all they have to do. To produce an organic robotoid it is necessary to have a pattern to go by. The pattern required is that of genetic coding taken from a few cells from the body of a human being. In this respect the Russian technique sounds like cloning, but the technique itself is totally unrelated to genuine cloning. A robotoid is produced within a matter of hours, and it simulates the human donor at his current age. Like any man-made copy of anything, a robotoid is never a perfect copy of the human that is to be simulated. There is always small discrepancies in appearance and behavior, but these are seldom great enough to arouse any suspicion. When the initial Russian breakthrough in robotoids took place years ago, the Rockefeller-Soviet alliance was still functioning. The Christian group who now rule Russia were already secretly more powerful than the Bolsheviks, but the final overthrow had not yet taken place. When the robotoid breakthrough took place, they moved quickly to minimize the amount of information obtained about it by those Bolsheviks still retaining positions of power. They also tried to prevent information about it from leaking through intelligence channels to the CIA. Nevertheless, partial information did reach the CIA and the late four Rockefeller brothers. By early 1975 the Russians were known to have successfully created at least one organic robotoid in the laboratory. Meanwhile the CIA was coordinating a feverish research effort aimed at accomplishing the same feat. Up to now, robotoid technology in the United States is far behind that of Russia. The American capability in robotoids is not even close to being operational, whereas the Russians are deploying them right now. But there has been at least one attempt to create an organic robotoid for public use in the United States, and I'm referring to the final fate of the late General George S. Brown. In April 1977 I revealed how much General Brown had sacrificed by that time as the price of doing his duty for America. But not long after that, General Brown paid the supreme price for his actions. It is only now that I am free at last to reveal it. On July 10, 1977, General Brown was taken to CIA headquarters near Washington, D.C. in Virginia. There he was taken to one of the many secret rooms designed into the CIA building by Nelson Rockefeller. The room was a laboratory, and the attempt was made to create a robotoid replacement for General Brown. The techniques employed were far more crude than those used in the Russian process, since the CIA process required General Brown to be on the scene. The attempt ended in complete failure. A crude facsimile of General Brown was generated, but it refused to come to life. Even so, General Brown could not be allowed to live, because now he knew too much. And so on the evening of July 10, 1977, General George S. Brown, the last great patriot in the United States government, was murdered. A normal human double was found for General Brown, since a robotoid attempt had failed. This was the man who testified in the role of General Brown at the congressional hearings on the Panama Canal Treaty September 27, 1977. At his side throughout, briefing and prompting him, was the Secretary of Defense Harold Brown. Occasionally the double would be flustered by a question and look down at the table in front of him until the Defense Secretary whispered something in his ear. Then he would look up again, say what he had been told, and so on. Once the Panama Canal hearings were out of the way, the double for the late General Brown was seen as little as possible in public. Soon there were stories that he had contracted cancer. Then the Air Force Chief of Staff General David Jones began acting as Chairman of the Joint Chiefs, months before the end of General Brown's tour of duty. In June 1978 we were told that General Brown was retiring, and last December the 5th, 1978, we were told he had died of cancer. At that point the General Brown double collected his pay and headed for Frankfurt, West Germany, where he landed on December 11, 1978 at 3:30 a.m. local time. It is a standing rule that doubles for important people never live long. And so at about 7:30 that evening, General Brown's double was shot to death in the back of the neck. Last month I revealed that an intelligence war of doubles had erupted in the United States. President Carter, Vice President Mondale, and their wives had fallen victim to this war of doubles as their Easter breaks away from Washington were ending. Now I'm sorry to report that Amy Carter, Billy Carter, Lillian Carter, and Hugh Carter all died soon after Jimmy and Rosalind did. All of them, including Amy, have been replaced by doubles.
Okay, so I'm going to stop it there because it gives you kind of a sense of what he's talking about. And it's nuts, right? It sounds really completely, utterly insane, and yet it doesn't. Now, those images that I was playing for you were these images of Putin theoretically being a time traveler. And, you know, he's got a kind of a common face. And there is a website, I think it was like The World or The Globe or one of these English papers. And there are pictures of him as a youth and as a teen and pictures with his mother. So we have a historical record of, you know, theoretically Putin in this lifetime. Again, it's all theoretical, but there's a record, right? But then you see these other faces from these other places and these other times. It's like, wow, that's pretty interesting. And there are other examples of that. I mean, there's one of Nicolas Cage who looks like somebody from the Civil War. There's a picture of, I guess, Jay-Z, looks like he's from the 1930s in New York. I mean, there's a lot of really strange doppelgangers. I think there's one of John Travolta where it's a pretty famous one. But Putin shows up more than once. I mean, it's a difference between, say, the Nicolas Cage photo and then about 5 different versions of Putin. Now, it could be a very common face just in terms of that part of the world, and there could be people that might resemble him. But I wanted to throw the Dr. Peter Better stuff in there, which I've played before, because I actually think there's something there. And I don't know if we're really dealing with a real human with Putin at this point in time, which is interesting because it was brought up, how do you do a chart of a robot? And it certainly feels that way. And even when we look at Joe Biden, I mean, how many versions of Biden are there? We've seen at the very least 3, maybe 4. I've talked about this before. There were 2 versions that I was aware of George Bush, at least 2. I saw multiple Trumps by the end of his presidency. Obama is an interesting case. I don't know if they did something to his head. I mean, he had all those, like, he had these channels on his head that looked like, you know, the rivers on Mars or something. You know what I'm talking about? They were all over his. I don't know what was going on there with him with that. I've actually seen some very unusual pictures of what looks like a automated version of Donald Trump and Donald Trump Jr. So I think this stuff goes on. And so when we look at somebody like Putin, or we look at somebody like Trump, or we look at somebody like George Bush, or whomever, right? Who are we really looking at? What are we really seeing? What are we really viewing? Are we really viewing a biological human? I'm not sold that we are. So in the spirit of astrology, I'm going to try to look at Putin's Trump, look at Putin's Trump, look at Putin's chart. I'm pulling Rick Levine there. It's so funny that they kind of intermingle. I'm going to look at his chart and do my best to decode it a bit here, because this is what we do. We're going to look at the chart of the moment too, by the way. We're going to get there. I just wanted to get into some of this stuff. All right, where is Putin? All right, just out of, I could just go to Astro Theme, but I like reading these charts better. And I did put one together. Here it is, right here. Okay. I think it's really hard to get a read on him. So, if we, excuse me, if we look at his chart, he is, technically speaking, October 7th, 1952. So he has Mercury, Saturn, Neptune, and even the sun here ingressing into the 12th house. He's a 12th house person. It's really hard to assess a 12th house person, especially when he's got all these planets that are clustered around. Excuse me. So we have, excuse me, sun at 13 degrees Libra, and then we have Mercury 23. So that's a pretty wide conjunction. Saturn is 17. So Sun-Saturn conjunctions are good for longevity. Like people who have Sun-Saturn conjunctions tend to live a long time, and they tend to have a lot of endurance, and they kind of cohere to that Capricornian rule that they get younger as they get older. Okay. So he has that. And the Mercury Neptune, we're just going to chart now. So we got Mercury at 23 and Neptune at 21. That would tend to be fairly intuitive, fairly psychic. But again, we don't really know. Now, Hillary Clinton has a 12th house sun, but she also has Sagittarius rising and Jupiter in Sagittarius in the first house. You kind of understand who Hillary Clinton is. Like with that Jupiter and Sag, she's kind of larger than life. Actually, whoever Hillary Clinton is, there's a version of Hillary Clinton that I actually think is funny. Like I've heard her say some things that were actually really funny. Like she's got this Jupiter and Sagittarian, sometimes vulgar sense of humor. Like we came, we saw, we killed him. That's vulgar. But she's trying to be funny. And that's like this big Sagittarian overstep. But that's what we get. Like we get a big portion of who she is with Jupiter and Sagittarius right in her ascendant. But the rest of her is hanging out in her 12th house. So there's a part of her that's very secret. We don't know. We don't really understand what's going on behind the scenes with her because she's a big time deal maker. Joe Biden has a 12th house sun, but I believe he's a Sagittarius rising. So we'll look at his charts to make sure. So again, there's a different side. You can see a different side of Joe Biden. You don't see that with Putin. He's a Scorpio rising. So he's going to be shielded. Whoever this version, whoever this template, whoever this model of Putin is, the template is shielded with Scorpio rising. And we have Venus here. So one of the things that Putin, again, whoever is, or whatever is portraying Putin, what we've seen is that he rarely gets angry. Rarely gets angry. If he says something that's emphatic, it's very calm. It's very collected. It's very matter of fact. I mean, I think the last speech he did, which was about Ukraine, was a little more intense. But you can see that with Venus in the first house. Whatever the model is, it doesn't really ruffle a lot of feathers when talking. Now, that said, Scorpio is one of those signs. And so let's just say, for instance, again, double D rating, this is about as close as it gets. For the template, Scorpio is one of those rising signs that either repels or attracts, and there's no middle ground. If you've ever been around Scorpio people, or even more importantly, Scorpio rising people, that's just who they are. You're either into them or you're not into them. And they provoke very polarized reactions in people. And that's who Putin is. He provokes a very polarized reaction. There's nobody saying, I don't know, I'm not sure how I feel about Putin. He's either the reincarnation of Hitler and Mao and Genghis Khan and Lenin and Stalin all in one, or he's the liberator, the great liberator of the white race. And there's very little in between with him. I mean, that's how his chart shakes out. But again, it's a mystery. Like, who or what is this entity? We don't really know because of what's going on over here in the 12th house. Now, we do know that, again, based on the template of this chart, that Pluto is on the midheaven, and it's a big deal. So we look at things like power, intensity. We throw in that south node, which for all intents and purposes is translating into royalty or bloodline from another time, right? So it's coming into this lifetime. It's like, okay, you've got Pluto here, power, leadership, royalty, right? All the things that ego, all those things that go along with Leo, and unfinished business. With this chart, this template, there's unfinished business. And it's kind of again, this time it's kind of big. We have Black Moon Lilith, which is the shadow that's cast upon whatever these efforts that Putin is trying to, whoever this person, whatever this entity is trying to manifest into the world. What's interesting, what's his degree of his south node? So that's 22. Let's see, Pluto's, so south node's at 19. So the US south node is at 8 degrees, I think, Leo. So it's up again, right around here in the model Putin models chart. We go down here and, Venus in Scorpio is one of those signs where it's all about power. It's all about navigating and creating partnerships for power. That's how Venus in Scorpio works. So everything, again, with the template of this chart is geared towards that. And dealing in shadowy realms in order to establish those bonds, those relationships with people of power, right? And we're dealing with power. We're dealing with things like gas, and we're dealing with things like Chernobyl. And we'll get into the whole gas thing tonight because it's fucking ridiculous. Biden now has ended new leases on wells and natural gas facilities here. He's like ended new, so you can't get a new lease. He's just basically put a stop to any new development on power and energy. And they're cracking down on getting power and energy from Russia. Nord Stream 2 is probably not going to be going through anytime soon. They may have walked that back. But here we are during a time of power and energy crises that's being theoretically initiated by what's going on in Ukraine and Russia. Biden says, okay, well, we're going to end these. We're not going to get any more leases. So this gets back to the Pluto return. The Pluto return doesn't have to do with World War III. We're already in World War III. We're already there. We've been there, right? And World War III is being perpetrated on this country. That's what's happening. And now the next wave, we've been having to deal with asymmetric warfare. We had to deal with what happened with COVID-19. And now we're going to be dealing with the shadow that's being cast halfway across the world from Russia and Ukraine. And how it's going to affect us financially, how it's going to affect us in the energy sector. I mean, this is a full-on, full-scale, asymmetrical, fifth-generational warfare attack on the American people. And this is just the next stage of it. And is Putin just playing a role? Who knows? Who knows? It's very hard to say if he's just playing this role. Just tweak a few screws here and put a new program in there. It seems like it's kabuki theater. Who was it? It was it might have been Glenn. Glenn sent me a text, and I think this is an important, and I could be wrong here because there could be Telegram channels that I'm not paying attention to. But in a world full of cell phones, we're not seeing a lot of cell phone imagery or a lot of cell phone video that's being captured in Ukraine and all the massive I watch these channels like live streams from Ukraine in 4 big cities. Now, obviously, those cameras don't move very much, but I'm watching the light change and I'm watching different hours of the day. Every now and then I'll hear a little boom, Every now and then I might see like a tracer bullet or something. I'm not sure what I'm seeing, but I'm not seeing a full scale all out war. I'm just not. It's not happening. And now we have Sean Penn over there, who is a spook. Sean Penn is a total spook. And he's like creating a documentary. Is it really? Oh, I see. Creating a documentary. Uh-huh. Right. Well, why is Ukraine letting somebody in? Well, we know why they're because Sean Penn is a little red diaper baby. He's a spook. And his father was he was blacklisted from Hollywood. That's why he's a red diaper baby. So Sean Penn he's basically like a son of a con. If you look at a lot of his movies, they tend to be on the subversive side. The Falcon and the Snowman, where he's selling state secrets. He's selling state secrets to the Russians. Gee, what does that tell you? Anyway, he's there. Who knows what kind of footage they're creating? I'm just saying you got to be really careful now. You don't want to have to take the fish hook out of your mouth. That's painful. Don't take the fish hook out of your mouth. And what can we get from this chart? Well, we can get that we don't know who this guy is. Like he's completely firewalled off from us. If this chart is remotely true, if it's a double D chart, he's firewalled off. He's got this Scorpio rising. He's got this Venus on the ascendant in Scorpio. He's going to make power plays. He's going to make moves. And if this is all true here, he's got a Pluto conjunction with the South Node. So he's got unfinished business around, quote unquote, being a king or somebody who is monarchical, right? Maybe one of those pictures of somebody we saw in one of those slides. Who knows, right? But in terms of astrology, it's a big deal. He's got Pluto conjunct Regulus. There's 22. Well, it's kind of conjunct Regulus is what here, 28. Yeah, I think it's around 28. So it's a wide conjunction. It's not like Trump, who has Pluto's more conjunct his midheaven, which is really very powerful. Look at the clone aspects. Moon in Gemini, 8th house. 8th house is like a laboratory, right? I mean, it kind of is. The 12th house is a laboratory too. The 8th house, the 12th house. Conjunct the vertex. So he's got this whole Gemini thing going on. And there's hardly anything going on with the moon. It's almost, I guess we could qualify it as being a singleton. Who's his mother? We get into these pictures too. The picture thing is also pretty weird. And if you go back and look at a lot of the pictures that are popping up from a lot of the Tartaria channels, it's like they're questionable. Not that the actual pictures, well, maybe the pictures themselves might be a little bit questionable. And when I say questionable, I'm talking about when they were actually taken, not if they were taken or if they were edited by Photoshop or something. I'm sure there's a little bit of chicanery in some of those pictures, but it's like, when were they actually taken? Were they taken when they discovered the camera and film, or were they taken even before that? Was there a different version of, like, we don't know. There's a lot that, again, we don't quite understand about technology and history and time. So when you see a picture of like Putin with his mother, and then you try to line it up with this chart, it's like, where's the mother? There is no mother here. Like, go down the moon. We got a semi-sextile and a sesquisquadrate. Those are minor aspects. We finally get a biquintile to what? Chiron. Hey, how about that? The laboratory. Like, there's hardly anything here with the moon. It's all 8th house. Again, it's all occulted. You're dealing with this idea of Gemini and doubles. It gets very weird here. You're looking at this chart as a chart that is connected to potentially this idea that he might be a robotoid. We might have a clue right here with the moon and the vertex and this kind of singleton action going on. It's kind of interesting. What else can we say about the rest of the chart? True node in Aquarius down here. There's the IC. And Saturn, this is kind of interesting, right? So we have transiting Saturn, and that's at was it 16, a little lower, 18, and his true node is at 19. So Saturn is conjunct his true node right now. And, what are we dealing with? Putin 24/7, right? So if we're looking at an astrological activator. Saturn's it. Like, okay, here you go. This is your purpose, Vladimir. You're on, right? And it's opposing the South Node up at the top of the chart. What's interesting about Aquarius is that it's radical. Like Aquarius is radical. It's kind of a liberator. We've looked at the color revolutions. We did it last week in my show. We looked at the architects of color revolutions. Gene Sharp, Aquarius, Sergei Popovich with Otpor, Aquarius, Saul Alinsky, Aquarius. We see all this Aquarian energy that is very prominent. A lot of the color revolutions start to happen in February, either late January, February, or beginning in February, then ending in March. And look what happened with the Euromaidan. The Euromaidan really takes off in January, right? January, it takes off during the time of Aquarius, January 22nd. They really start to move in hard. And by the time the 22nd of February rolls around, boom, over, done. And you can see this. You can see this with these color revolutions. They know what they're doing astrologically when they run them. So from an astrological perspective, and let's say this is the template of the robotoid or this version of Putin, like there's a there, especially with Saturn on the true node. We're talking about activation. And Saturn's going to be moving into this version of Putin's fourth house, which is interesting because that usually indicates some kind of a move. Like anybody who've ever worked with astrology, 99.9% of the time, Saturn going through the fourth house, it's like, okay, time to pull up stakes. So I wonder what this means for this version of Putin or even this version of Russia, right? Are they going to wind up doing something very different with, their capital or relocating part of their country into another country? That's quite possible. A lot of people talk about how they went after these bioweapons labs in Ukraine. By the way, I don't think that that's out of the realm of possibility because Ukraine is a freaking cesspool. I mean, they went in, Vicky Nuland. But by the way, you want to talk about astrology? Let me take a little bit of a departure from Putin just for a second. I'm going to show you something. This is funny. This is definitely on the astrological side. You get a kick out of this. Okay. Oh, Victoria Nuland. We can't call her Vicky. She's Victoria, as in victorious. Let's see. Let's find this one picture. Yeah, here it is, right here. Pretty straightforward. All right. Now remember, this is one of the architects of the of what happened with the Euromaidan. Let's see if I can find that. It's a decent picture. There's got to be a better one. Hold on. It looks like the article is really good, by the way. I'll just do this. Okay, hold on. Let's see. Oh yeah, she had an F-bomb. She said, "I don't give a fuck." It was about the color revolution. She said, "I don't give a fuck." Here she is. This is after they've come in and put the new government in place. What is she doing? She's passing out bread. Oh, I got to log in here. I want to get a good picture of this. She's passing out bread. This is what happens with her. She passes out freaking bread. I'm trying to get a really good close-up of it. You can see it here. She's passing out bread. Look at her. Here, have a biscuit. Have a muffin. Have a cookie. She's a Cancer. And how, like, is this fucking bizarre? Newland's Biscuits again. Maiden midwife's plan for U.S. policy on Russia is dumb, delusional, and dangerous. And she passes out biscuits. Sometimes you can't escape your astrology. Even if you're a tyrannical third generation Bolshevik, neocon, regime changer, you can't escape your astrology. You got to bring the biscuits. And that's what she did. Isn't it funny how astrology works? Here you go. Let me feed you. In the meantime, let me take over your country and start treating it like a 10-cent whore. I'll be the madam. I'll be the madam and I'll feed you biscuits. It's ridiculous because that's what happens. That's what happens. All of a sudden, the economy sucks. Putin is now charging them the same price of gas that they were getting. They were getting cheaper price of gas from Putin until all this bullshit happened. And then he said, okay, I'm going to charge you the European price. You get the European price. You were getting the hometown discount. You're not going to get it now. And when that happened, things happened in Ukraine. Things kind of went through the roof, right? They're doing trafficking. They're doing big time trafficking. You ever see the women in Ukraine? They're freaking beautiful. So trafficking goes up, right? You've got all this stuff going on with Burisma, all this corruption. It's all taking place there, and it all happens on the heels of this regime change. That's what happened, right? Did they set up biolabs there? Why not? I don't have a problem with that. Like people say, they went in and they blew up ape. I don't have a problem with that because they've done all this other shit there. Then why couldn't they do that as well? I mean, it basically became a U.S. proxy. Once they went in and flipped it, it became a U.S. proxy, just like Iran became a U.S. proxy. They go into these countries and they flip them. I don't think Iran has ever really found its own independence. It's still under some form of governance and rule by the United States and whoever is kind of controlling things there. It's not like, hey, you're going to be your own country again. Why don't you plug that dinar back in and make a bunch of people who have all these millions of dinars super fucking rich? That's not going to happen. Well, maybe it will happen. If you're holding dinar, I don't want to rain in your parade. But there's a proxy. Ukraine became a U.S. proxy. Now, is Putin just playing part of the game? Or is he one of the Russian Christian robotoids who are against the Bolshevik Rockefeller robotoids? I mean, it's kind of an interesting concept. So if then you get into robotoid war. Like, are they going to swap me? Are they going to find another Putin somewhere and throw him in there while they take the other Putin out? There's a funny movie from the 1960s. I think it's called Our Man Flint with James Coburn. And they actually get into this stuff. They get into replacing the president. Like there's a lot of hidden in plain sight stuff in Our Man Flint. Russia plays a role in that movie too. There's a whole Russian thing going on. It's a pretty interesting movie. I like it. And James Coburn is great. There's also some mind control, MK Ultra mind control shit going on there too. Fascinating stuff. So, what can we draw from the Putin chart? And if there is a there, clearly Saturn on his true node is activating his true node, right? He's run, or this model, this template of Putin has run Russia for all intents and purposes like a monarch with Leo in the midheaven and Pluto there. I mean, it sort of makes sense with this chart that is kind of on the cusp of being, legitimate. It's not completely out of the realm of this being the time. But again, we don't really know and understand who he is. With the 12th house, we know even less when we look at that moon in the 8th house in Gemini, which for all intents and purposes has absolutely no aspects attached with it and could actually be related to something like being artificially birthed or conceived, which is the 8th house, by the way. That's what the 8th house does, represents conception. So he's got a Gemini moon there with no attachment to anything. Interesting to think about. So reality is a hall of mirrors. And you have to be very, very careful as you navigate through this time. And the thing that you have to be probably the most keen and aware of is your relationship with yourself and other people, and do not buy. And even alternative news sources are very hard to navigate right now. There's a certain message board I've been going to for a while to get like the odd bits of ephemera. It's like, I can't even go there now because of the amount of propaganda that's being flooded by these trolls and bots on the pro-Putin side, on the anti-Putin side. It's just been like a deluge of having to sift through all this, like kudzu, like red algae. It's like been flooded by red algae, and I can't. It's hard to get anything. It's really hard to get anything. And then you have people who are looking at Putin as somebody who is a savior-like character. I don't really see Putin as a savior-like character. I don't. I don't necessarily see him as being the devil incarnate. I don't see him as a savior-like character. He might be. Again, look at the 12th house. You're going to try to understand that person and their motivation and their intent by what's going on in their 12th house or that moon in the 8th house. Good luck. Good luck. I think the best way that we can try to understand what's going on there is what's happening with Saturn and conjuncting his true node in the 4th house and opposing Pluto, opposing that south node up at the top of the chart. You might be able to get something out of that. And I do think that makes a fair amount of sense because, again, theoretically, he's playing the role of a liberator. For some people he is. If you ask the people in Western Ukraine, he's playing the role of a liberator. They don't want to be a part of the other side of Ukraine. They don't. They've been fighting this kind of a separatist war with the other side of the river. And there's a big river that runs right through Ukraine too. It's a natural boundary. You should just use it as a natural boundary. But there's other, I think, probably fish to fry. The other thing that people brought up, more than a couple of people brought this up to me, is that the buildings that they're bombing in Ukraine are Tartarian. Like they're going after these old buildings. That's part of what's happening here. And somebody else was telling me that a couple of people were telling me that Ottawa is just an absolute like wax museum of Tartarian buildings. And who knows what they have planned for Ottawa? I don't know. But a lot of people are watching the Freedom honk, whatever you call it, the truckers strike in Ottawa. We're noticing these buildings that are like, wow, these buildings are incredible and they're well preserved and they certainly look like they've come from a different time. They have a lot of that in Ukraine. It seems like they're being destroyed. So there's this whole other thing going on, which has to do with this reset, the reset of the time that we're in, because we seem to be waking up to the fact that, this whole idea of time and missing time and timelines is really becoming an issue that people want to have addressed. And so they just keep moving the scenery around. Now we're into this other phase. We're no longer in the mass. Now, by the way, this gets into Pluto. Before I get into Pluto and the Pluto return and different phases of the Pluto return, which I do want to talk about, I did want to look at Ukraine's chart. I wanted to look at Zelensky's chart because people requested that. So let's get into, what is this? This is Russia. Okay. So, yeah. Yeah, Russia's going through its Saturn return. That's interesting. All right. Let's do Ukraine's chart. Now, there's another chart for Ukraine where they think they actually put together these documents, which is whatever, right? Whatever kind of governance those documents represent. I'm more interested in this date and this event than I am the thing that they came up with, right? The contract du jour. So this is what it looked like the day they ran Yanushchenkov out of town. This is it, right? 2/22/2014. I chose 12 noon, high noon. So in this case, we have this version of Ukraine being Pisces. And look at here, just look at what's going on at that time. We have a Neptune, right? What is that? 2014. Yeah, right there. We have a Neptune Sun conjunction. It took me a while to remember that Neptune came on the scene in Pisces in 2011. So yeah, Neptune Sun Chiron conjunction. You're dealing with things like gas and oil, anything that's petroleum based, also drugs. I mean, when you get into Pisces, you're dealing with drugs, production of drugs. If it's a biolab deal, I mean, I could certainly see that. Chiron is there. This is a very weak country. It's super weak and it's being manipulated. Right there's Saturn right down there, and we have it's like the moon in Scorpio, Saturn Moon conjunction. That could be very much like Victoria Nuland. You know, you have this woman who is basically running this regime change with her husband, Kagan. And you know what's also interesting is Elena Kagan. I didn't put this together, but Elena Kagan is one of the Supreme Court justices. And it's spelled the same way as Robert Kagan, who is Victoria Nuland's husband. And his father is Donald Kagan, who's one of the original kind of founding fathers of the neoconservative movement in this country. It's like, oh, that's interesting. I never made that connection. Elena Kagan, Robert Kagan, Vicki Nuland. Got it. Okay. So you can see this here, though, with this Moon Saturn conjunction. They got a woman who's running a regime change and squaring Neptune. This is a vulnerable country and it's being manipulated. It's being totally manipulated. And at this time, we have Cancer rising at 12 noon. She's a Cancer, I think right at the end of Cancer, 21 degrees. So it's going to put her sun right there in the first house. And of course, they're going to be kind of flooded and overwhelmed by this woman, by this Cancerian woman who's running this regime change. And they're very smart because they're kind of piggybacking on this. So this is one of those things where it really does look like the elites use astrology, because if you back this out in Mars being in Libra, you back it out by a month, you've got your Euromaidan. Even though it started before then, it's clearly, Mars and Libra is all about justice and social justice and balancing the scales, and right, it's all there, and it's going to just slam right into this true node, which is at 27 Libra, right there. So they're all kind of cascading with, hey, it's going to be all about, balance and liberty and change. And because this is all very early Pisces, you're seeing these trines coming in here. So they're really playing with people's emotions. This is a very big, very emotional time. And I think probably some people thought, hey, okay, this is going to be good. We're going to get a bit of a better shake. They'll take us into the EU. The EU might, give us a few, I don't know, more biscuits like Vicki Nuland. But it doesn't happen. It does not happen because we have the Saturn-Neptune square. And guess what? They're fucked. They're let down. The people that basically run this thing, the woman that runs this thing, based on some kind of idea of nurturing or care, and here, have a biscuit, wind up fucking them over. That's what a Saturn-Neptune square does. It doesn't like adhere to the promises that theoretically this putsch, this revolution set out to deliver. It doesn't happen. Doesn't work. So you can see that this is really, if you're going to want to start a new country, sorry, this is a really faulty chart. If you wanted to overthrow a country and make it dependent and vulnerable to you, thumbs up, right? This is a great chart for that. What degree is that Saturn? That Saturn's going to be, what is that, 17, 22 degrees. Both that Saturn and that moon will show up in Joe Biden's 12th house. And who's the guy who becomes a big player in Ukraine? Joe Biden. Hunter Biden. Getting that money, right? You want that money? You got to get your prosecutor off my son's case. So Joe Biden is very connected here, very, very connected. And it may come back to bite his ass. This is a hard time for this country. Look, there's the South Node coming in, conjuncting the moon. Wow. They're going through. I mean, look, if you're somebody in Ukraine, even if this is kind of that's what I'm looking for, a Pixar kind of movie, right? It's still, if you're living there, it's got to be kind of fucked up, right? South Node conjuncting the moon, South Node conjuncting Saturn, and you're dealing with this real intense degree of uncertainty because the uncertainty was baked into the chart the moment they brought it in on the wings of liberty. What's that? Oh, I'm hearing sirens. I'm hearing air raid sirens. That's coming from Ukraine, live stream. We might look at that. I'm hearing it from the other room. Yeah, let's look at that. Let's break into the live stream. This might be worth let's do this. Hold on, where am I? Yeah, these are air raid sirens. Let's see what's happening. This is it right here. All right, I'm gonna do a screen share here. I guess you can see it. Let me just make sure I have the right screen share. Now, I've been following. So we have Dnipro, Odessa, Kiev. I think they've changed some of the. I've been trying to figure out if these are like tracer bullets. This is Lviv, and I've been watching this. I started watching a little bit earlier. I don't know if that's rain or those are traces. I don't know what's going on. I don't know if it's a video. The problem is that we're just not there. Now we're hearing these air raids. This is Kharkov right here. Kiev, Kiev cameras. So it is 5:54 local time. Nobody's on the streets, apparently. Unless that's a loop, and I've seen some loop. I've seen some loop video. So that must be snow. I mean, I don't know what that is over there. It's coming in all these different directions. But if those were tracer bullets, you'd hear them, right? You'd hear them, and that car wouldn't be driving, and you'd probably see a lot of these buildings being just completely shot out. So I don't really know what that is, and in the chat's really too. Okay, we're hearing air raid sirens, but I'm not really seeing it. Look at this beautiful structure here. Look at that. What I'm talking about. Okay, if I hear anything more. What? Oh, fucking Zoom. Cancel. Sorry about that. Yeah, I just heard the sirens. Anyway, getting back to that chart, that's a terrible chart. That is a terrible chart. No wonder they're going through what they're going through today, because that was the foundation of how that place started 8 years ago. So charts do matter. And when you get into that Sun, Neptune, Chiron conjunction, it's very scapegoaty, right? Sacrificial lamb. And it's really fucking unfortunate. All right. Why don't we talk about the Pluto return? And I think I'll take a look at the chart at the moment. So let's talk about the Pluto return, which is important. Because I think the big thing that we're going to be going through here is economic. And it's going to be the fallout of whatever this bizarre conflict is. And it's a bizarre conflict. It's really, part wag the dog, part mania, part psychological operation, and all the preloading that just took place with this thing. Just preloaded. They've been preloading Putin and this whole event really since, 2014, when this whole thing happened, 2016 from the Sochi Olympics, intensely for 6 years. And then we went Russia with Trump. So, this is how they've socially engineered people to respond to this moment. Now, all they have to do really is say, well, Russia's going to do some cyber attacks. We know that they're capable of doing cyber attacks. But who's really going to run those cyber attacks? Is it going to be Russia? Or is it going to be somebody else, some other group? Maybe it's going to be Unit 8200. Maybe it'll be, these so-called anonymous hackers who all work for the government. Because that's what happened. The first anonymous group, they all got busted. And they said, you either work for us or you're going to jail. And what do you think they did? Oh, well, I get a salary. I'll work for you guys. I'll avoid jail. So anonymous isn't even really anonymous. So they can do all kinds of shit. They could take the grid down. They could do anything that they really want to, because the goal here is to bring this country down. It's not to bring Ukraine down. It's not to bring fucking Russia down. I can tell you that right now. It's to bring this country down. That's what the goal is, ultimately. All right, so let's look at the Pluto return. And again, Biden's going to end any new leases on oil and gas. People are going to lose their shit, and that's what they want. They want people to lose their shit. They want to poke the people. They want to poke the bear. Okay, where are we going? Pluto return. All right. I don't know what happened to my. I think things crashed here for a little bit. Okay. All right, let's do this. The Putin return. Actually, to really do the Pluto return, we got to go to the 23rd. 12 noon. Okay. All right. So let's do this. Let's do a little synastry. So that was interesting. They I need to do Zelensky's chart too. Let's do Zelensky's chart first. There we go. Let's just do that. This should be, we'll look at this character. Then we'll do the Pluto return stuff. Okay. No, it's not what I want. Come on. There it is right there. There we go. Okay. So here is Zelensky, the current puppet. He is an Aquarian sun. He does have Venus in Aquarius conjunct his midheaven. I'm sorry, conjunct his sun, and he's got a 20-degree Aquarian midheaven. You know, for all intents and purposes, I'm sure he's very personable. Ninth house, you know, probably philosophical, gregarious, and he has Mars and Leo, which is kind of, I think this is interesting. This is where his acting shit comes in because he's an actor. Remember, he was an actor who played a president, and now he's a president. He was an actor that played a president on TV, who became an actor playing president in real life. So you can see sort of the acting chops here. Moon and Leo, Mars and Leo. Leo, of course, being the sign. Besides Pisces, I think are the two great signs for being an actor for me are Leo and Pisces. So he's got some of it baked in here. He's got a Moon Neptune trine, which makes him very adaptable emotionally. He can be very dramatic, but that Mars is retrograde. So hasn't he left? Has he split? I wouldn't trust this guy to defend the country at all. Not with a Mars retrograde in Leo. No. He wants to go back to Cancer. He wants to find security. He wants to find safety. This guy's not into fighting. He's not into fighting at all. It's interesting that he has Jupiter here on the ascendant in Gemini. So he plays actor president. He's perfect for the role. Like how perfect, he's totally perfect. With Jupiter on the ascendant, he's kind of running two personas here. He's got Saturn coming up on his midheaven. So this is an interesting time for this dude. Because Saturn is this call for action on the midheaven. It's like, okay, I'm going to take center stage now. And he's got this Saturn moon opposition. That's very interesting because, you know, let's say, for instance, this guy does have some love and some feeling for his country, right? There's a chance that he does. Maybe he said to himself, I'm the best person to do this, to play this role, because somewhere down the line, I might be able to do something where I might be able to help these people. And, you know, I can play the part, right? But let's say he does have some kind of feeling for Mother Ukraine. He just might. So guess what? You got the Saturn moon opposition. And with Saturn, which you're always dealing with in opposition, you're dealing with the forces that are coming at you. These are the changes that are being impinged upon you, or the pressure that's coming externally. So he has external pressure right now. And he has external pressure to do probably what he's told, right? And it's opposing his moon. And his moon is saying, hey, look, I feel for these people. I think, you know, whatever, this guy's got some soul. I do think he's got some soul. He's got a nice Moon Neptune trine. It's not bad. He could go off script with a Moon Uranus square. This dude could totally go off script. I don't think he's Rambo, not with that Mars in the third house, which is skittish. Like Mars in the third house has a lot of nervous energy, and it doesn't want to stay in the third house. It wants to go back to the second house. It wants to go back to this safe space, right? That's what Mars is doing. And it's opposing Venus, and it's opposing his sun, which he's supposed to have this front. He's supposed to be this humanitarian, progressive dude. And his Mars doesn't want really any part of it. And it's squaring Chiron too in his chart. So he's Chiron in Taurus. He's not even really in his body most of the time. So interesting chart, interesting character. Now, remember when they decided to flip the script in Ukraine, where was the true node? It was in Libra, but it was much further. It was closer to, probably closer to Spica than here. His Pluto closer to where Mars was, and the truth. So he's ultimately kind of the recipient of this regime change, but just based on this alone, which is pretty interesting. I don't think he'd be a very. I think it'd be hard to be in a relationship with this guy, with Neptune over here, conjunct the descendant. Although it's not necessarily bad, he's got a nice trine. I mean, I think he's got some kindness to him. He's probably got some soulfulness to him. The affliction here is with Jupiter and opposing, like doing more, promising more, being more than he can actually deliver. Like he's probably got more than two personalities. This guy might have a number of personalities with a Jupiter-Neptune opposition, but his Neptune isn't terribly afflicted. Although I'm not crazy about it being over here, conjunct the descendant, unless, I mean, that can be a good position if you have worked through a lot of your personal shit and you have somebody in your life who can be very Neptunian and very soulful. As you know, you're talking about twin flame territory, but you have to get there. And who knows, he might have that in his chart. He does have Mercury and Capricorn in the 8th house. So he is used to dealing with people behind the scenes with power. And the sextile with Uranus is a very quick move. And they very quickly inserted this guy into this position of power. He might be one of these characters that decides to go off script and go off the res. He could do that with Saturn conjuncting his midheaven, trining Jupiter in his chart. He might believe that somewhere that he's going to have to stand up for his country with the Saturn opposition, which will start to begin to move into place by the end of the year. It'll be interesting. If that's the case, he won't last long. They'll take him out. They'll bring in another robotoid. No, seriously, they'll take him. If this guy believes that he somehow has to do something to protect his people in the country that, he's connected to, he could go rogue. He could feel really like, hey, look, I've got this power. Unless, of course, he's sequestered in some kind of a room somewhere and they're just running the siege. I don't know. And anybody who thinks they know, right? Like, you better be careful. You better be very careful here because we're really in uncharted territory. But based on that chart, what I'm seeing with that guy and that guy's chart, he's got a little bit of heart. I think he cares about, with that moon in Leo, I think he actually cares about people. That moon is, fairly close to the 4th house cusp, 3rd house, 4th house cusp. He's got Jupiter in the 1st house. He's expansive, but who is he, right? Which persona is he giving you? The actor is president is actor, both. So keep your eye on him. He's an interesting character. If something happens to him, I guarantee you he decided that he was going to go off script and try to do something very Aquarian and unify his country. Who knows? That's how I would see it. Because right now he's got that Saturn moon opposition and these forces are coming in. They're hitting his moon, right? His ability to feel, his passion, because moon Leo is passionate. And he's going to go through that Saturn opposition, which is a big change and a big shift in his life. Like, I guarantee you, he won't be president of Ukraine by the time his Saturn opposition is over. And if he is, he'll be president of a different kind of Ukraine. But I'd say his reign is coming to an end. As it exists now, it'll have to be different. That's what happens with the Saturn opposition. Okay, I wanted to look at his chart. So we're about 2 hours into that tonight, aren't we? Okay, let's look at the Pluto return. And we'll get into this. Zelensky, interesting character. I think he's tall. He's like 6'3", 6'4". Okay, let's look at the United States chart for starters. Let's throw in some transits. right? Because that's the old Pluto returno. You know what's interesting about the United States is the South Node. The progressed South Node is at 25 Capricorn. So transiting Pluto is already on the progressed South Node of the US. I can even show that to you right now. Check it out. Let's go to chart selection. I'll show it to you. Like for me, the progressed chart of the United States is actually more problematic than the Pluto return chart, even though we'll take a look at that here. Check it out. Throw in some transits. So in the progressed chart, Pluto's at 29 degrees. So we still have that's why this 2-year period is important, because from 27 to 29 degrees, we're hitting quote unquote the natal Pluto of the United States, and we're hitting the progressed Pluto, which is at 29 Capricorn. So here is the South Node. Progressed South Node. Let's go back. Hello, 2020, January 2020, Saturn, Pluto, right here on knocking on the door of the progressed U.S. South Node. That's change, huge change, massive, big change. The U.S. is a Pisces sun, which I'm not crazy about. I'm just not crazy about the progressed U.S. sun. 17 Pisces, 7th house. I mean, and we're bogged down in this idea of fairness in relationships. It's like all the boundaries are just gone. It's like a relationship with God, a relationship with each other in the 7th house. It's problematic. And then you have this Neptune opposition with the progressed sun. We've got 13 years left of this progressed fucking sun in Pisces for the US, and then finally transits into Aries 13 years from now, which takes us into 2035. You know, that's where, you know, theoretically, this whole idea of this country can be reborn, but between now and then, it is a freaking miasma. It's a total, and the further and deeper this sun goes into this opposition, progressed opposition with Neptune on the ascendant, it just gets more and more swampy and difficult. And like there's the ability to dream and have a vision here, but there's also this idea of scapegoats and martyrs and all those things that go, and you're dealing with Neptune and Virgo, which has to do with health, and it's retrograde in the first, like it's a mess. It's a total mess. We got a Mars retrograde here in Libra. Hello, social justice warriors, you know, line 1, right? In the 2nd house, it's deconstructing things. This is not the best progress chart for this country. I'm just telling you. You know, we have Uranus at the top of the chart in Gemini, which is great for technology. It's great for AI because we're going to have, guess what? You know, we're going to have a Uranus return in this country. That's coming. You see the Uranus over here, right there? We're going to have a Uranus return, and it's not that far away. And it moves into this really crazy kind of, you know, truncated grand trine. When transiting Uranus gets to 10 degrees, it'll be right there, right? It'll be still be conjunct progressed Uranus, but it'll be in a wider trine with Mars, and Pluto will be there for a long time. So we'll be moving out of trine with Pluto. The United States moon, progressed moon, which is an interesting thing to watch. It's about a little over halfway through Aquarius. So we go back, let's see, it's 2 years in the progressed moon. So we go off by 4 degrees, which brings it to, 3 degrees, bringing it to 15. So that was about a year and a half ago, a little over a year. That's a year ago, a little over a year ago, right? So let's see, yeah, a little over a year ago. So that would be February. So we're going back to like January 2021. January 2021. That's when right around the time where January 6th is happening. That's when this moon goes progressed into Aquarius. It's right around that time. I'd have to go back and look. So the next phase for the progressed moon, so it's at 18 degrees. So it's right around the end of it was really right around the end of 2020, I believe. Right around the end of December 2020 is when the moon went into progressed Aquarius. No, I'll go back and look at the ephemeris for the progressed moon. And then we have this progressed moon ultimately coming in here by next year. Next year starts to move into Pisces. So the US is going to progress moon in Pisces, conjuncting the progressed sun. And we have Neptune there, which I think retrogrades back to about 20 degrees. So 2023, from a progress standpoint, not great. Just not great. Transiting Saturn is right there on the progressed moon in the 6th house. So that's challenging. Although, if you want to look at your emotions around what's going on from a very detached place, I guess that's a pretty good aspect. It's going through the 6th house, which is challenging for things like work. To me, this is, here we're dealing with things like automation and the loss of your regular basic 6th house jobs. White Castle is replacing a bunch of their burger flippers with robots. That's the 6th house. Like hundreds of White Castle burger joints are replacing their fry cooks with robots. Hello, that's Saturn going through the progressed 6th house of the United States chart. This is not a great chart. I'm just telling you. And even with Virgo ascending, like that's another 22 years of Virgo ascending. It's like taking things personally, and it's a hard ascendant, especially in that decan. Right? Maybe when it gets to the Capricornian decan, it might be a little stronger, but it's very mercurial, it's very changeable, it's very mutable. And what have we been dealing with? We're dealing with health issues. Now that goes back 8 years because we made a big shift 8 years ago. So 8 years ago is what, 2014, right? That's when the US was a Leo rising with the progressed chart. 2013, 2014, that's when this whole trip in Ukraine takes place. And 2014, we're getting ready to, we're 2 years into the second Obama administration in 2014. And that's when all the Black Lives Matter stuff hits. It's an interesting time. It's a very interesting period. The thing that might be the sort of the best aspect here is the 11th house with the true node in Cancer, Jupiter in Cancer retrograde, trine the sun here. To me, that's community. That's kind of like a back to the land. This is more rural with Jupiter going retrograde in a lot of ways here. And the violence, right? The violence in the inner city, the social justice stuff, retrograding, forcing people to rethink their relationship with urbanity and modern civilization. I think that's one of the saving graces of this chart. It's right here. I kind of, in a weird way, I kind of like Uranus on the midheaven. It's this weird wild card, and the Uranian return is going to be like super strange and interesting in my estimation. But getting back to Pluto though, look, here's transiting Pluto, right? It's right here at the midpoint between, it's not even quite, it's just really coming off of that south node. That south node, progressed south node in Capricorn. And what's it, what is that? That's the 5th house, and that's children. And these poor children have been masked up and traumatized, absolutely traumatized. That's bad news. Just really bad news. They're dealing with children and recreation, hobbies and pastimes and fun. Like just no fucking fun. This is no fun. This is the no fun zone. And especially with Pluto here. And it's not supposed to be fun. Like the fun is over. What's the best that we can get out of this here in this country? Just in this country. All right, I'll get back to the rest of the world in a second. Back to the land, Cancerian. It's Cancerian stuff, right? It's Cancerian values, nurturing, caring. And then the part of fortune is very interesting. It's a Leo, so it does have something to do with children. And it does have something to do with creativity and finding your heart and creating community here with the true node in the 11th house. This is I think the saving grace of this chart. And being forced to in a lot of ways by Mars squaring Jupiter, and even with Chiron and Aries. and the United States coming into their Chiron return, which is getting ready to take place. Normally, well, you'll see Chiron, it's at 20 degrees. It's in the United States fourth house, but it's gone retrograde by 3 degrees over this amount of time. So we'll have the progressed Chiron retrograde return in, I think, what, 2.5 years, roughly 2.5 years, close to 3 years. This Chiron moves really slow and it retrogrades a lot. So intense chart, not a great chart, I will say. If you're looking for a financial indicator, we have Uranus here, obviously transiting up through the ninth house. That's, you're dealing with foreign currencies, you're dealing with foreign exchanges, you're dealing with foreign assets, and coming in here and starting to square the moon, progress moon, and squaring progress Mercury. That's computers, computer systems, anything having to do with data, information, technology. The square makes it much more difficult. It's erratic, totally erratic. I wasn't planning on doing the US progress chart, but there it is. There it is. All right, why don't we do just a chart for now? Let's do a chart for now. And we'll wrap. Normally we do this at the beginning of the show, but we're going to wrap it up at the end of the show here. So let me do this. Let me get out of. Oh, you know what? I didn't show you guys this thing. Fuck. My apologies. I was running that whole description without showing you the chart. All right, there it is. There's the Virgo rising right here. Progress Virgo rising. There we are, 17. We have the inconjunct with Mars. That's, man, I could talk a lot about that. Why don't I save that till next week? We're going to revisit this chart next week. There's the progress moon at 16. There's transiting Saturn. Here's what I was talking about with the 11th house, with the true node. There's Jupiter in Cancer. We're trumpeting Cancerian values, retrograding here. Like, let's go back to the land. Let's go back to communities that are sane, right? We're being forced out in some ways by this Mars retrograde in the second house. Our values are being threatened. People are frightened. You know, they don't feel safe. That's Mars retrograde in the second house, and that's the social justice warrior, aspect that we're talking about and dealing with, having a cause, and it's retrograde, and it's shadowy too, right? With Black Moon Lilith there, there's like there's an agenda here that's afoot, and the inconjunct is how it's impacting how we deal with one another. This is the house of relationships, and it's very confused over there in Pisces. Like I said, it's a miasma. Everybody's either apologizing or they're looking for a fucking apology. And it's always somebody's fault. With this chart, it's like hard. And then here we go. Like, this is what I was talking about. South node, progress south node in Capricorn. Boom, there's Pluto. It's been there, right? It was there on the Saturn-Pluto conjunction at 25 degrees, right there, approaching. And went back there again, and it's right there now, and it's floating around here. So whether it's the US chart with Pluto in the second house, or the progress chart with the South Node and Pluto in Capricorn in the fifth house, we're being worked over. And this is the no fun zone right here. Well, like I said, it's not a time for fun. It's a time to, in some ways, be innovative, and it's a time to figure out a way to get back to the land and create something different and new. Okay. So thanks for putting up with that. All right. Let me go into this chart of the moment, and we'll try to open up for the rest of the people and the rest of the planet and the rest of this domain, this realm. Come on. I have Canada's chart. It's not too unlike the United States' chart in some ways. I was thinking of looking at it at some point. Okay, where are we? Here we go. All right, let's just do a quick chart of the moment here as we wind down tonight's show. Thanks for being here. Okay. It's not an epic 4-hour marathon like we did a couple of weeks ago. My God, I don't know what was going on with me. I was feeling 1977. By the way, I saw this great documentary on the making of the film DOA, and that's not the film with Evan O'Brien. It's a documentary about the Sex Pistols and the punk rock scene. And the documentary about the documentary is really fascinating. I learned a ton of stuff that I hadn't that I didn't know about the making of that film. So if you're into art and culture and music and punk rock and want to see a really interesting documentary, it's the making of the movie DOA. And it has its tentacles into all these different like weird parts of the end of the sort of the 20th century. Like the guy who is the executive producer of the film, this guy, Forsythe, he was a yippie. He was a drug runner. He created High Times magazine. And he was head over heels in love with the Sex Pistols and wanted to do a documentary on it. It's a really interesting movie. Okay, here we go. Scorpio rising right now. Who was talking about the new moon? Yeah, the new moon will be interesting because it's going to be over here. Yeah, that's what I'm. Remember, I was talking about that whole kind of Reformation period. Like we're coming up on it. We're coming up on the Venus-Jupiter conjunction, the Venus-Mars conjunction, which is what March 2nd, March 3rd, conjunction with Pluto. Like that's a very intense time. Very, 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 very intense time, especially in the realm of relationships. And there's kind of this the reckoning, this balancing out, this thing that happens with relationships at that time. So if you're in a relationship that is not equal, it's not going to. I used to be really hard to last through that aspect. And I don't care where it's showing up in your chart. Like it's about relationship. It's about the masculine and the feminine relationship in your chart. So that's going to be showing up. And if you're not dealing with equality, and when I say equality, I'm not talking about equality in terms of like how it's defined now, like reciprocity. Right? This is what what we're referring to, reciprocity. If you're not like practicing reciprocity in your relationships, then your most intimate relationships, your business relationship, it's going to come up, and you're going to have to re-evaluate that and reset that. If you are, then guess what? You could really profit off of this time. Like you could go next level. So if you're doing client work and you're doing really well, putting in a lot of time and effort and energy with your client work, you could go next level with your client work. If you're doing investing, I'm not a huge Bitcoin person or crypto person. I do have some, like, I did a webinar with Masaki, which was really great. I think if you know what you're doing, you might actually be able to do a few things in the crypto market, but you have to know what you're doing, right? You have to be able to make some moves here. And they're going to be unconventional moves because all these planets right now are squaring Uranus. So we're getting into some real, what's what I'm looking for, friction and tension when it comes to things like credit and Bitcoin and crypto. But I think if you know what you're doing and understand what's going on at a different level, I think there's some interesting things that can happen financially. Now, what's really weird is I know I was talking about how Biden is ending these leases for gas and oil, and yet it feels like gas and oil with this transit is going to be a huge moneymaker, right? It's going to be a huge moneymaker. So it may be that gas and oil prices will go through the roof as a result of this. It's one of those things like you can't really necessarily predict the market because it's all algorithmically based. But sometimes in a period where there's a shortage and prices go up, those businesses associated with the shortages are getting more for their products, so they'll go up. Other times, the forecast for that industry and the indicators will force the stock price down. So if you're playing a futures game, you're probably too late, because the futures game, whatever price you had set, right? Whatever price you you're going to stake on something and you had it, like it's probably, by the time you get there, it'll probably go back down. So you don't, so if you're playing the futures market on the petroleum side, good for you. You're going to make money. But there is something here that I think is, from a financial perspective, there's some profit to be had here. Like we're dealing with, Pluto, which is assets. And there's something going on with these sextiles, especially when the moon gets into the later degrees of Pisces, that I think is really interesting. I talked about it before. It's reformational energy, but there's also something interesting financially going on too. Very fluid, like moving it from sort of one system into another, but not, who knows? Maybe this is a crash moment where we have this tension, right? We have this tension between Mercury and Saturn and Uranus, and we have this economic tension, and this could be a crash scenario, and then we flow into something else. I mean, this is speculative on my point, but there certainly seems to be that kind of energy. There's another kind of energy here that could flip back in the other direction, and we could still move into a different kind of system or different kind of flow. Because the one thing that we know about Aquarius is it doesn't always work the way they want it to work, right? And it feels to me like there's a lot more interesting flow here that's moving into this stellium and moving into this other stellium, which is about to create itself, 3 days from now, right? So it's really around March 1st. Yeah, March 1st. That's when this moon comes in and we get into that new moon phase. Very interesting energy, super. It's non-competitive. There's a non-competitive energy during this phase and cycle, and things tend to move easy. And then what is it? March 6th, we get Venus and Mars moving together in concert into Aquarius. And that sets a whole new wave of relating into motion and moves into that conjunction of Saturn and Jupiter from December 21st in 2020. Like that, to me, when we hit March 6th, that's the beginning of a new way of relating. And we have a choice. Like we have a choice. We have a choice for the new way of relating. And I think it has a lot to do with looking at each other more as brothers and sisters and being more fraternal. And not a forced fraternity, but really like stepping back and looking at this person and saying, on some level, we are connected, right? And there are people that are close to you that are they feel like your brothers and your sisters. They're your extended family, which is very Aquarian. The key is to extend that out a little bit further so that we can bring some of these outliers into the greater, the greater family, of the larger circle. I mean, this is the thing to do, right? This thing to do, but to not do it in a way where we're getting played with a lot of this Piscean energy, all this victim energy, which is really what comes through in that progressed 7th house. Like watching The View and these women wringing their hand. Oh my God, we're going to have to take all these refugees in now. Oh my God. That's not what we're talking about, right? That is the synthetic version. That is the media matrix version of them basically, taking your puppet strings and saying, okay, well, this is what we have to do in order to get closer. No, it's not what we have to do. What we have to do is find that thing inside of ourselves where we look at each other and say, you're my brother, you're my brother, you're my sister, right? And we have each other's backs. This is what we have to do. We have to build this shit. And it's not easy. It is not easy to do, right? But we can do it. And the way that we do it is we understand that the Spirit of God is in me and it's in you and it's in her, right? And it gets real tricky when we get out in the far rings of Saturn, because it really tests it, right? It really tests that. Really? Okay. Well, maybe there's a chance that you work up to that moment, in that point, in that time. But until then, try it out. Try it on for size. See how it works, right? The trick is to see how it works without losing yourself. That's really what it's about. Because what happens is that we've seen the synthetic version. And it's like, oh, it's all love. Love's all that matters. And it's all this, this fake synthetic, saccharine, bullshit version of love. And the minute you come with a different version of love, something that is like, intense love or difficult or hard love, now it's exclusionary. Now it's not unconditional. It's only conditional within their version and their umbrella of what love is supposed to be, right? But we know what they're talking about. That's the type of bromide that they try to pass along in the world. It's not true love. There's a different version of it. Anyway. All right, still no fire in the sky. We've got Chiron. We have, just for now, the midheaven in Leo. That's hard, right? We're going through a dark winter. We're going through a time where we're just like, we're fucking over it, right? We're fucking over the face diaper. We're fucking over Tony Fauci. We're just fucking, now we've got this thing going on in Ukraine and all this other bullshit. We've got all these other people wringing their hands and all the Sturm and Drang. And it's like, we're just over it, right? There's no fire in the sky. There's no fire in the chart. So we have to get through this time. Just hang in there, right? Just hang in there. By the time we get into April, May, June, Mars starts to return. We get the sun in Aries coming. There's more fire, and there's more of a sense of spark and life. So do your best to get through this time. Practice some detachment with some of that Aquarius stuff. There's some flow happening this week. Look to make some moves. And the Venus-Mars conjunction is interesting because Mars is ruled by Aries, Venus is Libra. So this idea of assertion and agreement are coming together. And when they happen in Aquarius, it can be very interesting. And we're not dealing with fire, but we're dealing with this kind of intensity, especially now with Mars, Pluto. That does have some kind of volcanism. Things are getting melted down in some way so they can come back together again. Complex, simple, weird, beautiful, difficult. Can I get off this fucking ride times? You're here. We're here, and we're in it together for as much as we can be. And I would say that the next couple of weeks, right, till we get out to the end of March, we're living through some very powerful times. These are the times that change the course of history. These are the times that change culture. These are the times that change how people relate with one another, for better or worse. Like we are in this very fluid point, very fluid, but very fixed and very static, right? Things are breaking down. There's friction, there's tension, but then there's also this movement. Like there's this kind of Tai Chi movement in a way that takes us in an alternate direction or with an alternate current. Stay open to it. Try not to get caught up in the wheel of drama. Don't get wrapped around it. Okay, are we there? Did you see that? You're just seeing me again. I apologize. Right there. That's everything I'm talking about. Venus, Mars, Pluto. There's that sextile. Moon coming in. Right there. The new moon. There's that tension, that friction. Right. Here's the flow into the new opportunity. That's exactly what I'm talking about. Okay. I think we're going to bring the ship into port. Thanks for being here. We'll be back tomorrow on 15 Minutes of Flame, 15 Minutes of Flame. And I'm sure we'll have plenty to talk about. So thank you all. It's been great having you here with me tonight. And love to each and every one of you. So let me do a little bye for now. Before I go, I got a special shout out. I want to give a shout out to John Levi. John, if you're watching, I'm so proud of you for what you're doing. It's tremendous work. I don't know if you saw John's video today, but he's getting out of the coffee business and he managed to mediate his lease and have somebody else do coffee. And this is a huge time for him and a huge decision. And he's a warrior. John, you're a warrior. And I'm really proud of you. Thanks for doing what you're doing. And if you want to get a hold of me, you've got my number. All right. And take care, each and every one of you. Use your head in order to discern what's real, your heart to say what's possible. I'm Robert Phoenix. in this lifetime.